So, Nicolas, I'm so happy sitting down here in the DICE Summit. The same day the DICE Awards happening. And when people listen to our conversations, people know the result. So I would say, as an anticipation, congratulations for your win. At least maybe one win. How many you are nominated today?
I shoot six nominations, but let's hope there's at least one. Otherwise, it's gonna sound really bad.
Yeah, 6 nominations, including Game of the Year, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so, how are you feeling? That big win at the Game Award, right?
Yeah. Well, we're still thinking about it as like this magic moment in our careers.
Yeah.
And it's really had a good effect. I mean, the team, when you make a game and you finish it, usually a little bit tense. You never know how it's going to turn out. But having the confirmation that it went okay, that it went well, very well,
very well, yes.
Then I think it makes everyone feel more relaxed, and you almost get like a second wind, and you feel you can take on anything. Which at the same time is something that we're going to have to also like be careful about, because we have to never forget how to be, challengers.
Yeah. Absolutely. You have still long career ahead and all your team. But this was your first Game of the Year award.
Actually, we had one for VR, for Game of the Year.
Best Game of the Year.
Best Game of the Year. That was like, first time that we got into that category. So that was...
But you got Best VR Game of the Year award.
Yes, that was some years ago.
Astro Bot Rescue Mission.
That's right.
Yeah, so talking about career, let's go back. When you were young and maybe you were a gamer, how did you get into the industry?
So I'm from the south of France. I lived in a countryside, and I have to explain a little bit about my childhood to make the connection. But I'm from so I grew up in the 80s. I was born in 1978. So in France, there was a big influence of Japanese culture. Through animation and things like much more than from America, for example. It was like, on TV, it was almost 100% Japanese animation.
Oh, okay, I didn't know.
Yeah, so the French people, and I think Spanish, Italians, like the south of Europe, have that connection. So we grew up really loving that flavor, right? And over time, we also started understanding that the video games we played as kids, like, on Nintendo and Sega, actually were not made near us. They were made in Japan as well, right?
Oh, amazing speech you did as an acceptance for the best game of the year at the Game Award. You thanked Nintendo for making all these great games. We grew up playing those games, and they really forged our senses and or love for certain things, and an idea of quality, right? And so as we grew up a little bit older, we started working in the summer in like fields, and to make a bit of money to buy consoles from Japan. Okay.
So when I was 15, I think I played, for example, The Legend of Zelda on Super Famicom, all in Japanese. Yeah. So did I understand anything?
Oh, really? No. Played in Japanese?
Yeah. And there was no like guidebooks or anything back then. We just have to work it out. Usually you try everything, and eventually...
There's no Google app to translate, right?
None of that. And dictionaries as well, very, very complicated. So a lot of us developed that kind of love for understanding that, those games were made far away in Japan, and also they came to Europe, 2 years later. Back then, it was a long delay, right?
That was the time.
Yeah. So we really felt like we were playing like cutting edge stuff. So then later, when I turned 18, I graduated, and I did some literature studies. And I thought, okay, becoming a teaer, English teacher, would be a nice job, because I think I was under the impression...
French people need English teachers?
A good teacher is always in need, I think.
Okay.
And I felt like there will be a lot of holidays, So, So I went to England and thinking I'm going to stay there for about 6 months to learn English, and then quickly come back and try to, graduate quicker, or, So I went to London, and I started working in cafes and things like that. And then completely by accident, it was the beginning of the internet, and I had access to a computer for the first time, and, like email addresses and stuff like that. It was like, at the time, it was AOL and Yahoo and these kind of things, right? Netscape. And I was like a navigator. Yeah. And the friends told me, "Oh, you're from France." He said, "There is an application for a job in games. You really have to try it. This is for IDOS to be a localization tester." And I sent a motivation letter, and I would love to read it again today because it was probably like very naive and innocent. I love video games. I play this, and that. And but what happened is actually the guy in charge, another French person at IDOS, he was looking for, back then there were only 5 languages being localized, so he was looking for a French, a Spanish, a German, an Italian.
Infig, right?
Yeah.
German.
That's it. Yeah. And he called me at home. We had a conversation over the phone, and then he went, "Okay, that was on the Friday night. Yeah, can you start Monday?" That was it.
Oh, wow.
So next thing I knew, I was in that job with a PlayStation on my desk, localizing, testing a football game, a soccer game. And that was it. And, of course, I never went home. I never continued. I never went back to university. I never went to university in the end. I just continued. And from small jobs to small jobs in the industry, I worked at IDOS, at EA as well. I'd worked at the Bullfrog, which was Peter Molyneux's company.
Oh, yeah. So you moved to Guildford?
Yeah, in Guildford. Yeah, and that was really, really fun times.
So you started in the QA department.
Yeah, QA department.
And in EA, what did you do?
Same thing. So testing, So testing games on PC, and that was the beginning of online multiplayer as well, with Dungeon Keeper 2, it was called. Really, really great experience. And then finally, I got my first permanent job at Lego.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
Lego, Bullfrog was still part-time.
Yeah, part-time contractual. You get like a 3 months mission, and then once it's over, if there's more work, you stay. But if there's no more work, you have to go. So I went to Lego, and at the time, Lego were just making their first game division. So today, they've made many, many, many games, but at the time it was mostly PC.
Yeah. Well, they license typically, right now, but
that's right.
At that time, they are making games by themselves.
Very right. Actually, that's right. It was actually a division inside of Lego. Yeah, it had many names. It changed name every year. Lego Software, Lego Media, Lego Virtual, Lego Games, Lego everything. Right. And I became a full-time employee there. And because I had a little bit of experience in QA, I was asked to, lead a team and help form the QA department. Yeah. So, and the fun times because we were making games. We were opening up from PC to console. So I got to bring games like Lego Racers. I remember on PS1, Nintendo 64, Game Boy Color. We also touched Xbox. So it was like, I got to see all the platforms from the QA point of view. That was really, really good. Yeah. So I spent 6 years at Lego, and that was in that time that I became an assistant producer.
Oh, okay. Nice.
So at the end of those 6 years, I transitioned over. And after working in QA for a long time, it's a good entry, I think, QA in the industry because...
always a good way to enter the industry.
Because you get to see the end. You get to see actually a moment where there's a lot of tension as well. And you also get to interface with the development team, usually through a producer, right?
Yeah.
So you get to see how a producer, who is somebody who deals with many, many things at the same time, gets to do their work. Yeah. So that gave me the desire to become, a producer. So I asked if I could, leave QA, and somebody took me under their wing to
Yeah. I remember when I was producing games, and when, typically when, the game testers, they give a really good feedback. We used to poach them into the game team.
That's
so
right.
maybe there's something like that happened to you.
Exactly. You get a sense that, this, they have, they have a sense they can maybe communicate, or they can maybe they have a good eye for, maybe quality. So it's always a good place to look for the next line of junior managers, I think. Or producers. So I did a little bit of that, and that's when we entered the phase of, Lego Star Wars and all the great Lego games starting appearing through the licensing. And then the business kind of moved. I was still in England, and he moved to the north of England. So I was thinking, I was in London, and I wanted to remain around London. So I applied for 3 companies. Right? I thought to myself, okay, it has three companies were either Sony or Sega. I think there was a love, like, from the young age as well. And actually, the other one was Ubisoft. And I was at the time, Ubisoft. It was the moment where really, like, they were really pushing innovation. They were making games that were always like always groundbreaking. They were doing like Prince of Persia on PS2, and you could stop time and you could rewind time and stuff like that. And it was like, technical level was very high. So I went to Sega and I had the interview of hell. If you want later, I'll tell you what happened. But I mean, basically, it was the interview. Everything went wrong. And the following week, I went to PlayStation and everything went right.
Okay.
And I could enter PlayStation. So,
that was PS2 period?
PS2 era, 2004 in October. And it was at the moment where, everything was, it was still like a bit of a gold rush, because on PS2 you could still try so many things. I mean, you can still try many things, but back then it was like, and especially I joined a team that were doing EyeToy and SingStar.
Yeah. Especially our European studios did EyeToy and SingStar and Buzz, came up with something really interesting and very broader market.
Yeah, exactly. There was the mindset. And what was really interesting is that I came from Lego, where, we dealt with a lot of people who don't play games or are so young that you have to be really careful about, usability. And I was thinking, okay, I'm stepping into the hardcore gamers area, but in fact, not at all. With London Studio, it was very much, again, the same audience of how do we play video games without a controller?
Right.
How do we play with a granny,
Well, on one hand, and London Studio made that the Getaway, the most hardcore games, right? And on the other hand, made the EyeToy that you can play without a controller.
Yeah.
Amazing variety.
Yeah, amazing variety, and but I think it was really interesting to see that also the PlayStation as a whole really went from Parappa, and even there were some kind of like games that were even from preschool kind of style game, all the way to God of War and Gran Turismo that were like
mature.
Yeah. And that thought of like this kind of very wide offering is a thought that never left me. That's why today I think also I work on these kind of games for that are really for everyone, because it was a bit by accident that I was always exposed to these games that are not for gamers. But myself, I'm a gamer, right? So growing up, and these days I play like Elden Ring, and right now I'm playing Metaphor, and it's kind of. But making games for a different audience is really exciting.
It's
a
extra
challenge.
hard, right? To make the game easy to play.
And you have to imagine to be someone else.
Yeah.
You have to, and I like that challenge because there's something really. It's a real challenge to put yourself in the head of somebody discovering games for the first time. And maybe because also I have a lot of, I'm quite a nostalgic person, maybe it makes me remember what it was like to have those first experiences. Like first time you see video games, you see them moving on the screen, something magical going on, and then your brain is kind of, So all of that was really great to be at, London back then.
Can you explain for people who may not have experienced EyeToy back in the day, how did it work?
So back then, webcams on PC were starting to boom. So you would install a USB little camera on your PC and you could do video chat for the first time. So that was like the start of like video conversation on computers. And one of the scientists, scientists you could say at PlayStation, Richard Marks, came up with this idea of bringing this camera, attaching it to a PlayStation console, and then developing games in which your body being recognized on the screen would allow you to play games. So you would stand in front of a screen, you would see an image of yourself in the screen.
So place the camera on top of
the TV, yes, on top of the TV, looking at you. That's right. And so you would be inside the game, and by moving your body, you're in front of a mirror. And by moving your body, you could wash windows or punch characters or
I
do some
remember
exercise.
That demo, wash window demo was amazing.
Everybody loved that.
Had big smile on his face when he tried it.
It's super accessible stuff, right? I remember seeing it even when I was at Lego and I walked in there was a game show in London called ECTS, I think.
Yeah.
And I walked past the PlayStation booth and I saw all these people jumping up and down without a controller in their hands, playing that game, and thinking, what is going on? Is this really PlayStation? And it was. I understood later on that that was a prototype of EyeToy they were showing. So it's the beginning of motion gaming. Like this kind of idea of playing with natural inputs. And again, it was a really, really fun area to be. So from there, we moved on to PS3, and PS3 was a little bit trickier because, it was like a high-end hardware. Yeah. So that made, touching family audiences much harder because, it was an expensive piece of kit and stuff.
Yep.
But that's when we met.
Yeah. I remember, clearly that you were making EyeToy game on PS3, and the game was called iPad. So there's a virtual pet in the screen that you can interact with them, and when you draw something like a plane, that become the plane in the game, and fly around or something like that, and the pet chases it. Amazing experience. And at that time, I had 2 young daughters, and they loved playing the game. So you kept making, EyeToy kind of game.
Yeah. So we kept trying to break into like new grounds of like, making technology, something magical, and, we...
Oh, that's a PS Move game. Now I remember.
Yeah, and then it was turned into a PS Move, for the PS Move, launch lineup. So we worked through that game, and then that's when so that was about 2009. Yes, I remember. And it was interesting to kind of have to upgrade everything through a new console life cycle, where it's interesting how an audience, you have it with PS2 very easily, and suddenly the audience is hard to reach with PS3 just because the hardware
price.
is in the way. That was a very interesting lesson about just keeping things simple. Of course, we can't control these things, they're out of our hands, but it makes me feel like, okay, that was like a difficult hurdle to get over. Yeah. And then in 2010, I asked to move to Japan. Do you remember what happened?
Maybe I received email from you.
Yes.
And so I was president of Worldwide Studio, right? So you are one of the producers in London studio.
Yes.
And somehow you skipped your boss and your boss's boss and came directly to me.
Yes.
And said that, can I move to Japan and work in Japan studio? What was it?
That's exactly. So I was at home. I remember it was on a Sunday, and
were you drinking?
No, I was not drinking. I was totally fine, but I was thinking, okay, going into another cycle of like maybe 3 years, and going back to my childhood, it was like a kid's dream, right? And when I entered PlayStation, it crossed my mind, it's a Japanese company. Maybe one day there's a chance, but then soon after I got busy and didn't do anything with it. So that was like 6 years in London studio, and. So I thought, let's try it. Shuhei is super approachable because you used to come and you used to talk to us and make us feel like, you would really talk to members of the team, walk around. And there wasn't this idea of just like, management talking to management, you would be so approachable to us. So I think that made me feel like comfortable, and, sometimes you just got to try things. And so kind of, I went straight to you, and in 4 hours, you replied to me. First, he sent me a first email. He went, very good idea. Let's do that. That was it. And I was thinking, oh my God, I can't turn around. I can't turn back now. That's it. I was looking around my home thinking, I'm going to have to move out. English life is over, right? And then you sent another email saying, oh, by the way, let me see all the people you skipped. My boss and my boss's boss.
I posed the issue to all of them. And I don't know what happened. Were they angry or?
No, they were very supportive.
Oh, okay. Good. Good for you. You developed that relations with your bosses.
So, I wouldn't advise to, bend the rules to people. But at the same time, in hindsight, I think if I had maybe gone through the normal order of things, people get busy and it's possible it would have never happened. So I'm really thankful to you. I'm really thankful to,
sometimes that one email, right?
Yeah,
that changed your life.
Yeah,
And I was so happy because, I knew you, I knew what you were making, and you could add some new idea, fresh idea, perspective to the Japan team.
So yeah, and it was an amazing life experience because, at worst case, it would be a few years, and in best case, it would be more. And, now looking back, it's been 11 years.
11 years.
No, more than that, 13, it was 2011, so 14 years.
14 years,
yeah,
wow.
So I spent more time, almost as much time in Japan than I did in England. Yeah.
Wow. So what was your first project in Japan studio?
So Japan Studio, so I arrived in 2011, and at first I was trying to make myself useful. So when it's interesting kind of learning from there, because when I transitioned over, there wasn't a job that was really set for me. So I left a team behind, in London that got taken over by different management, and I arrived by myself. So first question is, okay, I cannot speak Japanese. How do I make myself useful to this group, right? So I proposed several positions, and one of them was to try and be advising about the style that maybe Western games tend to like. Very different position to be in, because you having to kind of critique other people's work and visions when some of them come with a background that is amazing, right? Because I had a very strong respect for the creators of Japan Studio. But in case there was some modifications we could make, or I could kind of maybe bring a bit of light on some things, so I tried to do a little bit of that, but it didn't really change much, if I'm honest. It was more like, okay, I would be trying to show me like different costumes for very, very, very kind of Japanese looking characters. It's like, is it better blue or green or red? And actually the kind of changes are more, it's more profound, right? It's about, hairstyles and kind
sometimes, oftentimes Japanese people are nice but stubborn, right?
Yeah, there was that too, and so that was one thing. But we tried to do it, and by doing that, I built relationship with the local people, and they were very, very kind to me as well. We went through this kind of really difficult time with the earthquake.
Oh yeah. Right after you landed.
Yeah,
right?
Just after I arrived. So during that first year, it was like a lot of things happened that were very more on the kind of like
I remember when the earthquake happened, many non-Japanese people flew back to their original country. Yeah. But you stayed.
I stayed. Yeah. I had just arrived.
Yeah, okay.
It was something that all my life I'd been, and so my family went down the south, like a bit further away, but I stayed in near Tokyo. And I was thinking, hold on, I've just been welcomed with this amazing life chance, and it's how would I feel if I just like left, and people are also left behind. So I'm not making a judgment, because it's difficult during those times. It's very, very hard to there's no right and wrong, but I felt a duty to stay, and so I got to see that year unfold. And if you remember the Tokyo Game Show that year, it was almost very dark. There was power saving and stuff. It's affecting a lot of parts of society and stuff. And then on the other end of that, we kind of recovered and a little bit. And at the time, Alan Becker was running Japan Studio, and I was knocking at his door every week saying, Alan, I need to get busy. Because it not having a everyday work sometimes can be quite.
Alan is amazing person. I worked with him for longest time. He was the lead producer of Crash Bandicoot in the US. Actually, Connie Booth was the lead producer, and Alan was her boss, and I was the localization producer for Crash Bandicoot, and that was 1996. So I worked with Alan, over almost like 30 years.
Oh,
or so.
Wow! You guys go back a long way.
Yeah. And he is, half Japanese, half American. And so he looks like American, but in his heart, he's Japanese. So very, very complex kind of person, very deep thinking.
Yes.
Right? And he really always supported innovation. Every time, I spoke with Alan, asked how you pick one game to make and the other. He always had one question to developer. After developer pitches games, at the end of the meeting, he asked the developer, okay, so I understood this pitch, but what you really want to make? And that's how he, tried to get the best out of the developer.
Yeah.
So he supported Dave Jaffe to create, God of War, Game of the Year. He supported the team who housed that game company. They made Journey, got the Game of the Year, and he supported, coming to Japan, and in the end, you got the Game of the Year. So many innovations he made possible. Amazing person I worked for so long.
I hope you can listen to this because you probably have a tear. But Alan is very, very philosophical. Like you say, like deep, and I think it's not just a product he thinks about. It's like he thinks about the people, he thinks about the interactions, the emotions, I could tell that. And so eventually there was an opening for me because at the time you were involved in this too. PlayStation 4 was in the making, and
our first party were pretty much well involved in the hardware development at that time.
Yeah, so controller, camera, and all that. And so because there was a controller and a camera, I was asked, hey, you have some experience with the EyeToy camera and the cameras. How about we take that experience and try to do something? So I was lucky to have a few people joining around me who also could speak good English because my Japanese was still very rough, and we built what was called at the time ASOBI team with an exclamation mark. And that was going to be that was an R&D team inside Japan Studio, which worked as a bridge between the hardware division and the studios, where we'd make lots of demos using prototype controllers.
So hardware team make the hardware prototype, and your team receive the hardware prototype and make the game prototype and share back with the hardware team to discuss.
Yeah, that's right. And so we would show, other studios, and the idea was to try and think, okay, what would excite them, so that they can really take advantage of that new controller and do things even, more creatively or more, surprisingly than before.
So let me explain. So on PS3, we did PS Move that had a light, ball to be looked at from the USB camera attached to PS3. And moving to PS4, the hardware team, jointly, worked together with, our, studio teams, decided to make a new camera that has two cameras to be able to
triangulate.
And the DualShock 4 had the light bar that camera can take a look at, so that the game PS4 can know the distance. And your team were making some examples of how to use that system.
So it's again an evolution, you could say, of like the EyeToy concept, and with some partially augmented reality, where you can see yourself, and the game, partially, completely like, games, but with the controller, position understood by the game, so that you could do things that were kind of a little bit more, innovative. And we were trying to find like new things, like using the touchpad on the controller to flick shurikens at the screen. There was a little ninja game and stuff like that.
That was like a multiplayer game, wasn't it?
Yeah. 4-player multiplayer, and really fun. I'm sure today, like we can dig it out, and that kind of game is still fun.
So that was pre-installed game for PS4, right?
Yeah.
So I struck a deal with the hardware team, so they funded the development of that your game that was pre-installed. That every single PS4 player should be able to try that.
That's right. So. We didn't think at first that it would end up in front of the consumers. We thought it's just R&D for our own learning, and then that's all ASOBI will ever be. But then when we got to this stage, we had lots of these primitive looking demos. You came and went, great guys, that looks really nice. Let's polish them up and put them in a box.
Yes.
And we had 5 months to do that.
Okay, short time.
So we looked for an art team really quickly, and we worked with them to have this game. And the game is called the Playroom.
Playroom, yeah.
And the Playroom, the name actually came from EyeToy, because EyeToy used to have you had those mini games, but on the side there was this kind of experimental rooms that were a little bit, the technology was not quite ready, but it was stuff that people, we wanted the users to see. So we call that the Playroom. So the Playroom was like a recall of this kind of open space where you can experiment, And the name stuck because, our game before Astro Bot was called Astro's Playroom exactly for that reason.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's for the PSVR.
PS5.
PS5.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
So the idea is like pre-install game or playrooms because they're kind of a little bit more open. It's not. It doesn't have to be like a gamey game. It's more like a way for you to spend time with the hardware and have fun and explore. Yeah. So we made the Playroom, and all that knowledge that we got around the camera and the tracking and the LEDs became really useful for the next big hardware, which was
PSVR.
PSVR. Right?
Yeah.
Project Morpheus. So you came along, you said, guys, we got to look at VR. And I'll be honest with you, at first, when I heard about VR, I was in two minds, because on the one hand, you try a headset from any makers at the time, and you try the demo, and there was always something amazing and magical. Whatever it was amazing. Being inside the stadium, looking at the character.
Yeah, that Oculus demo, like just one room.
Oh yeah, in Italy, it was Tuscany.
Tuscany demo was amazing.
Yeah. But at the same time, Team ASOBI, we were trying to be the multiplayer, fun, co-op, sitting on a sofa, accessible to everyone, and actually putting a headset on your head takes us back inside a more like isolated kind of form. So we discussed that inside the team, and we thought it'd be so nice if the screen of the TV could be used as well. So we have two screens, and we can have both. We can have people on the sofa playing a game on the TV and somebody in VR playing together. So we hacked with a PS Vita dev kit, like a really kind of, we made a hack, and you could play 5-player VR, or 1 player in VR and 5-player
and 4 player in headset. Other players watching the TV and play like a regular game.
That's right.
But that player in headset is inside the game, right?
That's right.
As a game character.
Yeah. And at first, this feature was not planned by the hardware division. What you see on the TV was supposed to be a mirror of the VR
only. The VR player, what they are watching.
But we made so much noise about it. And because we did that hack, we invited all the execs to come and play a game where we could mix VR and non-VR. And then when they played, I think it was Imai-san from the
system
software who went, okay, and he actually made that feature a default feature for PSVR. So you could choose to use the headset on its own, or you could use to split your resources and display both in VR and on the TV, which, it's hard to do from a development standpoint, because you have to split your resources. But if you plan that from the start, you can do some asynchronous gameplay.
So you are making two games, right?
Yes.
Or one game.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So it's hard to do, but it was a good example of how VR can be inclusive. And the reason I'm mentioning this episode is because, once again, it's about it's hacking. Going against what's been decided sometimes, and going against what seems like the natural course of things is also a very important part of our jobs. We have to be challenging, and sometimes we have to be really like, you might feel like the world is against you, and you are the only guy in the room, but your instinct tells you something.
Yeah, like you skip two bosses and send email to president, right?
Yes. Or Ken Kutaragi making a PlayStation, right? I wasn't there, but I read the book. Apparently, it was like really,
he instigated Sony president.
Yeah, that's right. So I think it's.
But that's another great story about how collaborative, hardware team and our game team were to discuss new features, new hardware platform, because they had a strong desire to make their next PlayStation really great system for the game developers to make games on. So they listened to our feedback really well.
Yeah, and the collaboration still exists today, and it's really, really fun. It's very special.
So that was the game. What was the name?
The Playroom VR.
Yeah, Playroom VR. So that was the not pre-installed, but everyone who purchased PSVR was able to download
for free. Yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and inside that game, when we tried a lot of prototyping for VR, one of the things we did was to test a non-multiplayer game. So the next, as we developed the Playroom VR, there was something in the back of our head while doing the prototyping. It was to try and do classic games in VR, even though it was very counterintuitive. The whole industry, and I remember sitting at GDC where there was a talk of like VR specialists, purists, and they told the whole audience, if it's not first person, it's not VR, you're doing it wrong. But we wanted to try things like classic games, where you could see your character, but in VR, and see what we could add. And so we had a little test where there's a little character you control, but the character can also turn around and look back at you. And if you remember, we were not the first ones to do that, because Oculus Rift did that with Lucky's Tale.
Oh yeah, Lucky's Tale, yes.
And in fact, the two of us at E3, you grabbed me in the alleys of E3, said, let's go to the Oculus Rift booth.
Yeah.
And back then it was very open.
We were exchanging demos each other.
Yeah. And I remember we sat down in a room and we played several demos, and Lucky's Tale was one of them. And I was thinking, this really has, it proves, we're not the only ones thinking about this. Those guys have a game that is almost going to ship. So we continued experimenting, and that's when this idea of the the first Astro game came through. So we decided to put that inside Astro's Playroom VR, because even though it was not a multiplayer game, we thought if we don't put it in, users will never see it. It will be a dead prototype forever, and what a shame to not try. So we put it in, and then what happened is that a lot of the gamers buying PSVR, they enjoy the multiplayer games, but what they enjoyed more
was that small
platformer.
Level. So that was one of 5 different experiences. And people wanted make this a full game.
Yeah, make this a full game. And so it was really nice to hear that confirmation, because we felt, wow, our instinct, in fact, was correct. So we quickly put the next game into, and I think we realized it in Astro Bot Rescue Mission was made in 18 months.
Yeah, so the PSVR launched in October 2016.
Yeah.
And Rescue Mission came out in Christmas 20.
Yeah, a little bit before, actually. It came out in end of August 2018. Fall 2018. Yeah. So we quickly went through that, and it was an amazing project because we made it without any expectations. All we wanted was to do the best possible evolution of that prototype. And help VR and show people, okay, VR can do this, and that. Yeah. So we were trying to come up with many original ideas, and we had no idea that it was actually going to be, a profitable game, and and take us even to some winning some awards.
The DICE award.
Yeah. So that was really, really nice. And after that, when the PS5,
again, your team was heavily involved in the discussion for the PS5 and the DualSense, right?
Yeah. So we made some demos once again and show them to the world, the same kind of thing.
One demo everybody talks about, like Scott Lodi still talks about, was the demo of the haptics your team made for the hardware team. That there's a virtual cup and there's a water to pour into. And you feel there's a water in your hand without anything by using the haptics.
Yeah, just by having the left and right kind of vibration kind of bouncing around the controller, you can give that illusion. And it's really interesting because, all of that a lot of it is illusion. It's about the sound and the look and the vibration. And if you remove one of them, it doesn't quite work. So the brain is
multimodal.
Yeah. You have to fool the brain into this kind of emotion. So we spent some time there, and it was really, really fun. And then the decision really came. It was a very hard decision. Do we continue inside VR, or do we open up Astro to more people? And it was not forced upon us. I think back then there's something also that it's interesting to say, and I think it's to your credit, is that I think there was always a lot of freedom and democratic style. Maybe that's from my point of view. Maybe for you it was also, more difficult. But I always felt that we had freedom at the studios, and if we didn't believe into something,
right.
We were not forced to make it.
Well, your boss was Alan Becker, right?
Yeah,
and all he cares about how much passion and ideas the team has, and he must have easily supported your wish.
Yeah. It was an easy, I remember it was a very easy conversation with him. He went like, yep, go off, do it.
and so that became the Astro Playroom. That was again the free software for the PS5 launch.
Yeah, for the PS5 launch. So that was our third time making, a pre-install kind of, introduction title. And that led to us, like we did in the VR, we do a small test, free for everyone. We gauge people's reaction, and if it goes well, then we go off to make our big game. So we quickly looked at the reactions, and then when Astro's Playroom came out and people tried the DualSense, they had a really good reaction.
Haptics and adaptive trigger.
Yeah.
That was an amazing showcase of these features, not just for the players, but for all the other developers, in the industry.
Yeah, that's right. Because sometimes we think that all that influencing only happens at R&D level behind closed doors, but in fact, the games that you release also are very important into influencing people, and you see the results of these maybe 2 or 3 years later. But and it was with Astro's Playroom, we were wondering, are we giving too much? Are we giving not enough? Because we had so many things we wanted to show the world what you can do with the controller, but at the same time, being a free game, we had to reserve some things for the next game. And that when you became this sort of like producer versus creator, you want to give the world everything, but at the same time, you have to also think about, you need to eat lunch tomorrow. So you have to keep...
But you had the wall full of ideas, right? Post-its,
So, let's talk about that maybe, how we come up with these ideas, right?
Yeah.
So we do a lot of brainstorming at Team ASOBI, and usually we gather 5-6 people for a small session. We have a very focused topic. For example, it could be, we're looking for enemies, and we're looking to use a particular feature like adaptive trigger. What could we come up? So, and these 2 concepts, enemies versus adaptive trigger, and then we come up with this rapid thinking where everybody draws one idea on one post-it. And at the end, we show them to each other. Then there's a bit of like a discussion, and then we have another round. And just by doing that twice, so you spend maybe 30 minutes in a room, you generate easily about 100 ideas, right? And then we put them on the wall. And then we look at them. And then, when we need to prototype something new, we go inside that pool and pick some new things to prototype. And that's how we go through this rapid iteration of prototypes, because trying lots of things is really, really important. And trying things fast is like a massive winner, right?
Yeah, I remember you invited me to join some of these, milestone check, or every 2 weeks or so, you gathered everyone from the studios. And everyone report what they did, and let people try the game. I have really fun, playing the game, and people are watching me play the game, and if this works or not, and move on to the next, 2 weeks. So that was your methodology of developing the game.
And the 2 weeks is really, really important, especially when you're trying gameplay mechanics. Our gameplay programmers are really the heart and soul of Team ASOBI. Because they're not just programmers, they're also game designers. They really understand what makes something fun. And so for 2 weeks, one person would work on one idea. So one of these ideas that came out of the brainstorm, a particular enemy, using the adaptive trigger, for example, that becomes a goal they have for these 2 weeks. And at the end of the 2 weeks, it needs to be playable. Right? But because one single person worked on it, they're able to move really fast. There is no what happened in game development, where time is really, really lost, is when a lot of people are colliding, I think, and not too sure what they're making together. But
just
when
debate and spend time.
And do and undo. But when you leave one person to be in charge, if that person has a clear vision to begin with, and of course the talent to do that, but I mean that's it's expected, right? Then at the end of the 2 weeks, you have something you can play. Sometimes it plays fantastically. Sometimes it doesn't really play well. Sometimes it's because the idea was like not good. Sometimes it's the implementation. But the fact is, if you do that over a team of like, I think we have about now 10 gameplay programmers. Every 2 weeks, you can look at 10 individual demos of gameplay. If you do that over 3 months, over 6 months, you really, really have a massive amount of content. And then it's much easier to put it together and polish it.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Astro Bot, the game, just released last year, massive, great, reactions. So the game, I platinum, I'm very proud, and I don't remember, but spend many hours, doing it, and really fun. It's a full price, almost full price game, big game. It failed, but made by relatively small team, right? How many people worked on that game?
So 65 people worked on the game.
But when you started, you are less than that.
When we started, it was the 30 just the back of the VR, so about 30 people, and in order to get that amount of variety, it was really, really important to prototype really, really fast in isolation. So that first phase, if the game took about 3.5 years to make, and if you roughly cut it, the first third is spent on prototyping. The second third is spent on, tidying it up and making it, the production. And the last third is on the polishing, and that's really important that we don't sacrifice that last bit, because that's when you need the time to reflect, cut, adjust, and a lot of the final quality, resides in that. In that. But that very first step is really important to get, all the ingredients we need to cook that nice dish, right?
Okay.
So the prototyping part, I cannot stress how important it is, and that's for the kind of games we make. I think for more narrative games, I think there's a different approach. But for us, it's very modular. It's lots of little components, almost like Lego bricks, and you can click them together into whatever shapes you want.
Right.
But we have that freedom, to be able to undo. For example, if we have a level that is too big, we can chop it into it becomes 2 levels.
Oh, nice.
So one problem became a very good thing, right?
Yeah.
So this idea of having a game
like
that is...
Miyamoto-san saying, the good idea is to make 2 things happen, right?
So, and this modular approach is really useful for that reason.
So the game had like 50 levels?
Well, actually, I think total, it's if you put everything together, it's over 80 plus all the DLC we did, so we're probably close to 100 now.
Wow.
But you're right, and it could have been fine with 50. And that's the great thing about it, is also like to know we didn't get obsessed on the scope too much. The game is 12 to 15 hours to complete. And in fact, it's probably right and fine, because...
people want to finish games these days. And so you didn't, when you started making the game, you didn't create a design document that this game has 80 levels? Or...
No, it was more organic. It was more like, depending how many prototypes we can come up with, how many ingredients we can farm early on, that indicates how far the scope can go. And it tells you how much you're going to have to repeat yourself, or how much you can have unique things. Because if you have a lot of individual components, then you can afford to be more unique. If you have less components, you're going to have to recycle more, right? I like to use the analogy of cooking, because to me it's really like that. Early on, you gather your ingredients, then in the kitchen you assemble. And if you take an ingredient like tomatoes, for example, there are a million ways to eat them, right? So one ingredient can have different kind of ways of being used. And it's all about making sure that we use them in a way that doesn't feel like the same taste, right? And at the end of it, you have a lot of variety at a low cost.
So your rapid prototyping and the iteration really help, game all level to be very well polished. However, one of the things people really enjoyed playing the, Astro Bot was all these guest characters, right? From, all PlayStation characters and third party, companies, beloved characters. And I was amazed. I didn't know that, with all the 300 bots, like the initial game had, half of that were guest characters, right? And considering all the effort it must have taken to communicate to third-party companies and ask for approvals and show them and get feedback, amazing amount of time your team must have spent to be able to accomplish that. So for the size of the team you had, it could feel a bit too ambitious when you started. Well, how did you manage that?
Yeah, you're right. So, again, it's about finding ways to do things simply, right? So very early on, when we decided to do that, whatever characters came from the SIE world, we had to make it easy. So I remember we had a seminar a few years ago, and at that point, I took the chance. I was presenting something about VR, and I knew we were gonna, or about Astro's Playroom, and I knew we were gonna have the need to contact everyone. So I asked the question back then, guys, by the way, if in our next game we wanted to use your characters, would you make that easy on us? And a lot of people internally said, yeah, because after 2 or 3 games, there was that trust that we could reach a quality level that was acceptable to them. However, we needed to have one strong example to really finish, to give everyone confidence. So we started with Kratos. We made a really, really nice Kratos with like the fur and everything, and show that from the previous game, from Astro's Playroom, he was a real level up. He wasn't just like a hat or something like that, but he was like the character and the animation were respectful of the core material. Right?
And it had the gameplay, right? Felt like a mini God of War game.
Yeah. So that one was like even extra special because it had the gameplay too, right? Once we show that as an example, I think everyone is much more relaxed about, giving the IPs, because first, like the quality level is reached. And also like, it's comforting to know that something as precious as God of War, if it's there and it's okay, then the rest will be too.
Yeah.
But it was important for us to not grade partners and say we give a lot of love to premium IPs and we give less love to... Not like that. We said it doesn't matter the importance of the IP. We're gonna give them the same amount of love, because somewhere in the world, someone loved these minor IP just as much.
In terms of amount of love that particular character getting from smaller number of people must be the same level.
Yeah. So we had to be careful. So that was for first party, and that covered 2/3.
Yeah.
And then for the other third, you're right. That goes really wide. It's about, I think, over 30 individual publishers. So we used the best examples we had, like once again God of War, and we approached them one by one. And
you had other department helping that communication?
Yes. So the third party relation department played a massive part into that, because those guys are the ones talking to these publishers on a daily basis. Yeah. So we had to really like make a really good partnership with them. And if we could manage that, then we could really amplify our reach. So we spent time to really explain to them the idea. And what I have to say is, across the board, so our third-party relation, these are people inside PlayStation, but also all the partners, everybody played along in a way that I wouldn't expect. If you asked me the question 2 years ago, I would have said, out of all the characters we want to use, we'll be lucky if we can get 15-20% of them, because some of them just feel like untouchable characters. But in fact, we got 95% of
wow, almost everything.
Almost everything. There's a few that were difficult to get for.
And which were? Of course, you're not saying.
But usually the good reasons is, for example, like sometimes they were quite obscure characters, but there was a fear that if we use them, it might start a hype about a revival when it was not the case.
Okay.
And that's understandable. We have to be careful about the consequences. So, but in the end, it worked. It worked out, and so that was a lot of work. But then, as you see progress, and as you see like a character from, for example, you see Solid Snake arriving, and then you see a character from Biohazard, like Resident Evil, arrive. When these characters come in, it makes us so happy, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So we want to keep going, and and actually, this week, we have new levels releasing. So yesterday we just launched, well, at the time we record, it was yesterday, a new level that has a Hachi from
really?
From Tekken.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that was leaked somehow, right?
Yeah, it was guessed by people because they saw the artwork and they figured
I
out.
was the culprit.
In a puzzle. Yeah, you posted an image of the puzzle that we offered, and inside there was amazing. A little tiny detail. And people picked it up. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, congrats again for the amazing reception, and still keep adding. But you must have started working on next project. What you can talk about?
Okay, so one thing, on the back of Astro Bot, what we thought is, whatever we make in the future, we want to surprise people. I think surprise people. So continue having a game that really, when you play it, you feel like the unexpected happens. And whether it's the Astro World or not, the Astro World is irrelevant. We need to surprise people. That's very important. That we don't go into making expected games. Right? That's one thing. And of course, the same high quality. But the other thing is also like a mindset for our team is to reconnect and very quickly, and I think we're there already, remember what it's like to be the challengers and to forget about the successes. The successes are fantastic and it's great and we should be proud about them. But in order to also do our best work, we have to think simple.
Yep.
And to remember what it's like to be, remember where we come from.
Yeah. And, keep being humble and being a challenger. Because people say that, you are only as good as your last game. Right? Yeah, that's a great message to your own, team members as well. Yeah.
So, it's been an amazing adventure of various countries and various games. But always the one connection throughout the whole thing was, the love for games, imagining the players and the kind of the joy, especially in the case of Astro Bot, the kids. The first memories we have playing video games are incredibly important because they're the moment where, for us, there's a lot of magic that happens. And so I think it enters our heart in a way that is much deeper than later in life. Right. And to be able to make a game that is going to have that role to play into new kids today, it's a privilege, it's a duty, but it's just an amazing, amazing chance. And so very, very thankful for also all the parents who kind of allowed us to get into their lives and trusted us, right, to do that. So all of that has been a really, really positive, journey. And I'm really thankful, Shuhei, because actually you played a massive part of that.
I played a little bit.
Many, many steps over the way you were there, and it's your philosophy also that just, allowed us to be ourselves.
Wow, thank you. And, talking about young audience, actually Nintendo is launching Switch 2 this year. Are you planning to port the Astro Bot to Switch 2? That would be a great game to their audience.
I mean, we definitely match the audience, but that's not something I'm thinking about.
You
but
are not allowed to say.
I will. But I will definitely buy a Switch 2 and play their games. It's a fun, also healthy competition, and they are the masters in that field to me still, and we have a lot to learn from them, and I can't wait to see what they've been cooking because it must be really interesting.
Yeah. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
And, congratulations again. And I'll be celebrating your next win tonight.
Together.
Yeah,
let's do that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Shuhei.
Thank you.